Hey guys, how's it going? I'm back here with another video, and today I decided to bring this tutorial which some of you guys have requested me in the past, but I never got to actually make it. However, today I'm gonna do it, and we're basically going to go over how you can build some drag and drop functionality into your React application. This is a really awesome functionality that you can add to your project. This definitely adds some value to your project. It definitely makes it look a lot better. It is a functionality that is really interesting. And I just created over here an example project of what we're going to be building to teach you guys how you can actually use the library and how you can actually make this work. So this is what we're going to be building. You can see I have some sort of items that I want to drag and drop. In this case, they're just images. As you can see, I grabbed like images of my face. Probably they're like my profile pictures of like my YouTube channel and my LinkedIn and stuff. But basically what I want to do is there's this div over here, and I'm not caring a lot about styling at all. But what I want to do is I want to be able to drag an image and just drop it inside of the div. And you can see that when I drop the image, it's now over here. And when I drop this one over here, it will also be over here. And you can see I can keep adding the images and it will be completely fine. The order also doesn't matter. Like I can put it like this and it will have a different order. There's many other things that you can do. We can definitely add some functionality at the end to, like, when you drag and drop this will disappear, but I don't think it is as important for the tutorial. The important parts are understanding how the library works, understanding how the logic works, and knowing how to implement this in your own project. So now that we know what we're going to be building, if you guys could leave a like and subscribe if you're not subscribed, I would massively appreciate it. It will help push my videos to more people. I would be very happy if you guys could do that because I'm putting a lot of effort into the channel, so I would just be very grateful if you guys could support it. So that's basically it. Now that we have that done, let's get into the tutorial. Okay everyone, so as you can see right here, we have a brand new project. There's nothing in it. I just deleted some of the files that already come with the create React app command, but basically we have nothing inside of our project, and we're going to build this from scratch. So in order to make this work, we're going to be using a library called React Drag and Drop. That's literally the name of the library. We're not going to actually implement this all on our own, and the reason why we don't want to do that is because it is too much work while you can just abstract the logic for it whilst using some well-defined library like the one we're going to be using today. And in order to install it, I already actually installed it here. You will need to install and run the command yarn. I'm just going to open this up and just open like this. In my case, I'm using yarn, so I would write yarn add React-DND like this. And then you need to install React-DND HTML backend. So I'll just copy this and paste it over here. If you're using npm, it would be npm install and the name of the packages that I just mentioned, but you just run this command to install the packages and it should be all fine. So after you install the packages, it should be completely fine to actually start implementing the feature into your project. And one thing you need to understand is if you're going to implement drag and drop, you need to wrap the highest order component with some sort of provider that already comes with the drag and drop library. So I will import this over here. This provider just serves to alert the library that the following components inside of this provider will have access to this functionality. So in order to implement it, we just need to import from React-DND, and we're gonna import over here the DND provider like this. And then we'll just come right over the highest order component, which right now it's the app because it is the first component that renders when you enter into your application. And before everything, we're gonna wrap it all around with the DND provider like this. So I'll just wrap this around, and this everything inside of this should now have access to this functionality. And one thing we need to do is we need to import from the library that we installed, the React-DND HTML backend. And I'm going to say import from this one over here. We need to import what is known as a backend in order to make ours work. And the one we're going to import is the HTML5 backend. I wouldn't worry that much about the specific core components of this library. If you want to check it out, they have the whole code because I believe it is open source, and you can just check out the code, understand how they create their components, how they create their providers, their contexts, and just understand how the library was actually made. But for simplicity reasons and for reasons that most people will actually never need to know that, they will probably just want to implement the library and use it in their application. I won't be going too deep into that. However, all you need to know is that when you put your provider, you need to pass a backend property like this. And the backend property you're going to be passing is the HTML5 backend that we just imported. And now that this is done, everything inside of this wrapper over here will have access to the functionality and it will be working perfectly. So what we want to do is I actually want to create a components folder, and I'll just say components like this. And inside of this components folder, I'll create a component which, let's call it a drag drop.js. And this actually will be the component which will include just like both the drag functionality and the drop functionality. It's basically where we're just going to render the app inside of it. So let's come over here. You can see I created the component by using the snippet RFCE. If you don't have that, that's an extension. But basically I created the component over here. And inside of it, I actually want to take this off and divide this into some fragments, because I'm going to actually divide this project or this component into two different divs. And the first one is going to be the div containing the pictures. So what I'm going to use to drag. So I'm just going to give it a class name of, I don't know, pictures, like this. And then I'm going to have another div which is going to be the drop, right? So it's going to be the div which contains the little box where you can drop stuff. And I'm going to call this board, because I imagine it's like you have some pictures and you're, I don't know, attaching them to a board. And now what I want to do is I want to come here to our app.js and I just want to import the drag drop component. So drag drop, and over here I'll just say import drag drop from the path that has the component, right? So over here. So you can see that we're able to actually render the component. We currently don't see anything on our screen. However, what I want to do is I want to grab those images and just basically display them inside of this div. So to do that, what I want to do is I want to create a list of images right over here. Actually, I'll create it over here. And I'll call it a picture list. This is just a list of stuff that I might be able to drag. One thing that is important to understand in this library is the fact that every single object, every single element that you want to make it so that that thing is has the ability to be dragged needs a different implementation of the use drag hook, which I'm going to explain later on. There's this hook from the library where if you want to make something to be draggable, if that even is a word, you need to use that hook every single time. So what I like to do is I like to separate the logic and create a separate component which contains the hook and contains the logic for dragging, and just map through a list, for example in this case pictures, so that each picture already contains the logic and each picture is in itself draggable. So what I want to do is I want to create this list over here, and each item, each image will have two different properties. One of them is going to be an ID, and the other is going to be something like a URL to that specific image. The reason why we have to use an ID is because we want to have some way to identify. So if you recall in the project, what we want to do is we want to basically drag the images over here and put them over here. So we need to have some sort of way to identify them, and a great way of doing this is just matching each element that you make able to be dragged with some sort of identifier like an ID. So in this case we're gonna have three pictures, so as the example I showed. So I'm just gonna copy this 3 times and I'm gonna create the 3 IDs that I want. So 1, 2, and 3. And I'm gonna paste the URLs right here, and I'll be back in a second because I'm just grabbing images from Google. Okay, so as you can see, I just pasted all the links that for the images that I showed in the beginning, and this is basically done. This is the structure of our picture list. And what we want to do now is we just want to display this picture list, right? We just want to see them in our screen. So to do that, I'm going to come here to our div. I'm going to map through this list by saying picture list.map. And for each element in this list, all we want to do is we want to grab the element and call it picture, and then return something, right? We want to return something that shows information about this picture. So as I mentioned before, the way we're going to do this is to make every single one of these pictures draggable. We're going to create a separate component over here, and call it picture.js. And over here, we're going to implement all the logic for making like some sort of element be able to be dragged, so that now all of them will have this implementation and all of them will be working independently from each other. So in order to make this work, for each element in the list, we want to return a picture component like this, picture. And I'm going to import this at the top. So I'm going to say import picture, and it will automatically go. And what we want to do is we want to have access to the ID and to the URL of the picture inside of this component, right? Because what this component will return is just a single image tag like this, which will be the image we're going to display. And inside of this image tag, we want to display the URL, but we don't have access to the URL. The URL exists inside of this picture object because picture list is a list of objects and each object contains a URL. So what we're going to do is we want to pass this as props over here at the top. And the two things that we're going to grab as props is the ID and the URL. So I'm going to pass the URL over here because we can pass it now like this. We can come over here and say URL equals to picture.url. And then for the ID, we'll just say ID is equal to picture.id. Now the reason why we're accessing the ID is not clear right now because it will be very useful when we start actually implementing and being able and adding the functionality to attach the image over here when you drop it. So for the first part, you'll just assume you need this ID and it will become clearer why we're using it later on. So let's start by implementing the dragging functionality. So to do that, we need to come to our picture.js because this is the elements that we want to see, right? If I refresh this, it should have been rendering the images. Let me take a look why it's not rendering. Oh, it's not URL. I'm sorry about that. It's actually src. Completely, I don't know why I thought it was URL. And you can see my beautiful face appears, but obviously it's huge. So what I want to do is I want to set a width to each image to 150 pixels. And by the way, the code for this is all in the description, so if you just want to check it out, feel free to do so. If you just want to copy and paste the code, that's completely fine as well. One thing I want to do is, I already wrote some CSS over here for all of this, and I just want to import the CSS here at the top. So I'm going to say import, and then two slashes, and then app.css, like this. It's just that I want to make so that both this board and the images appear like I was showing in the beginning, and everything looks a little bit better. So right now you can drag an image on every website because that's just a functionality that you can do. But obviously there's no detection. No one is like it doesn't do anything if I drag it, and we want to change that, right? So to do that, we're going to come to our picture.js, which is where our images exist, and we want to import some stuff here at the top. So the first thing we want to import is the use drag hook from the React-DND library. So React-DND, like this. And this hook over here, it is extremely important. For every element that you want to make draggable, again, I don't know if that's a word, but for every element that you want to make draggable, you need to call this hook again. So what we do is we come over here, we say const, then we put brackets, then we can grab two things. The first thing we need to grab is a variable, which is a boolean, which determines if you're currently dragging something or not, and you call it isDragging. It will return true if you're dragging the element, and it will return false if you're not dragging the element. And then you need to grab this thing called drag, and this will be used to reference which element you want to make draggable. And then over here, we're going to set this equal to use drag, like this. And then over here we need to pass not a function, or it is a function, but it returns an object like this. And the object that it returns, it contains some pieces of information. The first one is it needs a type, and every element in React-DND requires a type. So what do I mean by a type? Well, in this case, we're trying to drag images. We're trying to drag like pictures. So what we need to do is very simple. We just need to give this a type. Just give it a string which determines what kind of thing we're trying to drag. In case you want to drag different things different ways, you might have different types. You might want to create an external object or an enum if you're using TypeScript to hold all the different types you have. Right now, for simplicity reasons, I'm just going to write that the type is called image, like this. And I just invented this name. There's no reason. If you're using something else, if you're dragging a div, you can write div, whatever you want. This is just an identifier. And then inside of here, we want to pass a collect property, which in itself, it will contain a function which returns the following. It will return, actually, just like we did above, it will return an object, and this object will contain one property, which is dragging. So we're using the is dragging over here, and over here, what we want to do is we just want to ask, okay, we're going to convert this into a Boolean, and we're going to say monitor, because we need to grab monitor from this function. It's the argument to the function, monitor dot is dragging. And this is a function, so we'll just do it like this. And this should be working right now. I'll explain a little bit better what this is, but let's just test to see if this is actually working. What I want to do is, I'll just write some very simple here example. Let's make it so that, I'll give it some style, and let's make it so that if you're dragging the image, it will contain a border of 2 pixels. Actually, I'll do it like this, 5 pixels, solid, and pink, if and only if is dragging is true. So I'll say if is dragging, then we want to set this border. Else, we want to set the border to be equal to 0 pixels. So let's test to see if this is working. If I start to drag this, it doesn't work. And the reason why it doesn't work is because we haven't actually referenced the element that we want to drag. So we grabbed this value over here called drag, but we haven't used it yet. So the way we identify which element in our HTML we want to make draggable is by basically coming over here and just saying ref, passing a ref, and then using that drag as the reference, like this. And now if I come over here and I try to do this, you'll see that when I'm dragging it, it will have the pink border, but when I drop it, it will eliminate the pink border. Same thing with the other ones, because we are generating them individually through the loop. So it means it's kind of working. Obviously, this is not the whole point of the tutorial. We're going to start using this logic to implement more complicated stuff, but at least we know that it is working. Okay, so now that we have this basically done, I just want to quickly talk about the collect function, which I mentioned that I was going to explain a little bit better after we just finished writing the code. Basically, what the collect function does is you can actually define different states and props that are accessible throughout many different, like all the times you call the use drag hook. So in this case, what are we passing is the is dragging variable over here. And the reason why we're passing this is because we need to take into account if it is dragging or not. We don't really need to use it. I'm just using this because I wanted to show you guys the example, but technically this collect function is optional. You don't need to actually pass anything. But if I want to keep track of information like if it is dragging or not, this is how I define it. Over here we have the monitor, which you can take a look at all of the properties you can access, all of the functions that the monitor contains, but one of them is the is dragging function, which it returns true or false, where, like based on whether or not you're currently dragging the object or not. So this is just a way to access this state and destructure it over here so that we have access to this kind of information. But if you don't want to access the is dragging boolean, then you don't really need to. The collect function is optional. But now that we have this done, let's actually start working with the dropping functionality. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to come over here to our drag drop component right over here. And I want to come here to the top, and what I want to do is I want to basically create a state, and I'm going to call it the board. So it's just a state that is a list, and let's call it board and pass the function set board. And the reason why we have this is because this over here will be the state representing what images are inside of this little box over here. This is how we're going to manage this. We're going to have a list, and as we drop, every time we drop one of these images over here, we just add them to the list. So we need to have this board currently over here, and if for some reason, for example, just to show you guys, if this image over here, the third image, was inside of this, let's just see how it would look. Let's put it over here as an example. Initially it will start empty, but for now let's just put it as an example. And over here at the board, what we want to do is we just want to loop through everything wait, let me just do it like this. We just want to loop through the board list by saying board.map, and over here we'll grab the picture because the board will contain pictures, and exactly the same as what we did over here, we're just going to return each picture like this and just grab the URL and the ID. So now that we save this, you'll see that this image will be over here because we set it to be the image inside of the list. If we wanted to add another image, we could have just put this over here, and you see the other image appears over here. But what we really want to do is we want to be able to have the list empty initially, so have it like this, and whenever we drop it inside of this space over here, we add it to our list. And to do that, we need to use something called the useDrop hook, and that comes also from React-DND. We're gonna say useDrop like this, and I'll just say from React-DND like this, and we'll just play around with the hook by saying const, and we're gonna open and close like this. Right now, we can grab, similar to the useDrag, we can grab a certain piece of information from from dropping, and in this case, this variable is called isOver. And then we also need to grab the reference object that we're gonna pass to our drop station. So similar to how we did with the drag one, we need to grab a reference and put it to the object where we want to reference our drop, right? And in this case, we're going to pass this drop reference inside of our board because we want to be able to use the whole board as the drop area. So we're going to say ref and pass the drop over here. And now what we want to do is we want to set this equal to useDrop like this, and we'll just pass, similar to the useDrag, we'll pass a function that returns an object like this, and inside of here we're gonna have a little bit, it's gonna be a little bit different from the useDrag. What we need to take into account in this case is, first of all, we need to tell what kind of objects we want to accept, and this is one of the interesting things. Over here, we said that the dragging is of type image, so we can only accept elements of type image. And down here, what we need to pass is a function that is called whenever you drop the item. So what kind of function will this be in this case? Well, let's just think about it this way. We want to add, whenever we drop something over here, we just want to add that image to the board list. So what we can do is we can actually create a function over here, call it add image to board, and set it equal to a function which takes in an ID for the specific item, and we're gonna use this ID as the actual element that we're using, and we're gonna use this ID as the identifier for us to be able to add the item to our list. And how do we have access to this ID, you might think? Well, with the drop function, we can grab the specific item that we just dropped by passing it over here like this, and we can call the add image to board function like this. And each item will have many different properties, including, if we recall, over here, we can pass stuff for the item. For example, I can pass an item property over here, and inside of it pass an object containing properties for this item, so that we can have different identifiers. And here it comes where we're going to use the ID. Each item has a different ID. So what we do is, we can just pass an ID property over here, and just say that it is equal to the ID that we passed in the props. So now, what happens is each item will have a different ID, and we can identify them by saying item.id inside of the add image to board function. I hope this isn't confusing. All we're doing is we're just trying to identify which image we want to add to the board list, so that we actually drop it inside the correct image inside of here. So what we like to do now is we want to make it so that we actually are creating this isOver variable over here. I mentioned in the picture component that in order to have access to the property determining if we're dragging or not, we have to use the collect function, and it's the same way with the useDrop hook. We have to come over here, pass the collect function, and instead of passing isDragging, we need to grab the isOver, and we're gonna monitor isOver like this. And now we have access to it. And why do we need the isOver? Well, it's just for in case we wanna, I don't know, change the background color, change the screen, just to see like if we actually dropped something. What I like to do sometimes is maybe change the color or maybe like just change the color of this a bit to make it look a little bit better. We're not going to deal with this right now. What I want to do is I want to basically write the logic for the add image to board and see if it's actually working. So what I want to do is I'm just going to console log the ID whenever this function is called, so that we know if we're actually correctly managing, like if we're actually correctly dropping the images. So just open our console and let's try to drag and drop this image inside of here. You can see that if I drop, there should be a console log of the ID, and that's exactly what happened. If I try with this one, it's 2, and this one is 3. And if I try dropping this somewhere else, like here, nothing happens because we aren't actually dropping it in the correct place. But if I drop it here, it works perfectly. So it means we're actually it's actually working, which is amazing. But now we need to write some simple JavaScript which will allow us to grab the image, the picture with the specific ID from the picture list, and then add that image to our board list. So to do that, we'll just grab the picture list like this, and we want to filter the picture list to only include the picture with the ID equal to the ID that we have in this function. So to do that, what we do is we just say picture list dot filter like this, and we'll just filter the picture list and grab a picture for each element, and just return back. We only want to keep the picture which has an ID equal to the picture dot ID. And now we have a list with only one picture, which is the picture with the ID that we want to drop over here. And all we have to do now is we just want to set the board to be the same board as before, but now we want to add add the new picture that we just grabbed over here by saying picture list and grab the first one, because there's only one element over here. It filtered out all the elements but one, and we just want to grab that one element that is in the list. Now what should happen is, since we are looping through this board at every second, we're gonna alter the board by adding the new picture, and it should display the new picture over here. If I drag and drop it, now the picture is here. If I drag and drop it like this, it's now here, and it's now here, which is amazing, right? If you want to replace it, if you want to add the functionality for replacing, you can just do it something like this. Instead of saying set board with this logic, you can say set board, and instead of adding elements, you can just set the board to have a single element and just pass the picture list like this. And now what happens is you can add one picture, but then you just replace it, which is really cool. I honestly love React drag and drop. I've used it in the past and I absolutely love it. It is a bit complicated. I do understand that. I'm not sure if this tutorial was that good, because it is a topic that I definitely recommend watching a video first like this one, just to get an idea of how it works, but then checking out the React drag and drop documentation, this one over here. It is awesome. It contains a lot of stuff to read. Just reading around it, understanding how it works, and looking at the examples, it is amazing. That's how I learned it, so I would definitely recommend it. Also, the code for this is in the description. I'm going to post it in GitHub, so if you want to check it out, just look at it. And yeah, that's basically it. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like down below and comment what you want to see next. Subscribe, because I'm posting 2 to 3 times a week, and I would massively appreciate it. It will help push my videos to more people, and I'm putting a lot of effort into this channel, so I would massively appreciate if you guys could help it out. So yeah, that's basically it. I really hope you guys enjoyed it, and I see you guys next time.